If I had known what kind of man was standing beneath my fire escape that night, I might have kept walking. Instead, I opened the door. Chicago was buried under 6 inches of snow when I left the bookstore at 12:47 in the morning, with the wind cutting between the buildings hard enough to make every exposed inch of skin hurt. I had worked late helping with inventory, and all I wanted was my tiny apartment, my unreliable radiator, and whatever leftovers were still hiding in my refrigerator. Then I saw him. A man stood beneath the narrow awning beside my building, shoulders tight against the cold. Snow clung to his dark hair and the collar of an expensive-looking coat. He was tall, maybe 6 feet 2, and somehow looked completely out of place beside our dented mailboxes and overflowing recycling bins. I stopped several feet away. "Are you waiting for someone?" His eyes lifted to mine. Gray. Alert. Tired. Not anymore. That sounds ominous. It was not meant to. I should have unlocked the building door and disappeared upstairs. Instead, I noticed his hands. They were trembling slightly from the cold. "There is a 24-hour diner about 8 blocks east. Closed because of the storm. Hotel on Michigan Avenue. I can get there." He said it like a fact, but he did not move. "Then why are you still standing here?" A faint smile touched his face. "Because I am reconsidering whether proving that point is worth freezing for." I almost laughed. Almost. "Phone. Dead. Car. Unavailable. Name." He hesitated just long enough for me to notice. "Nathan Calloway." I held out my hand. "Identification." His eyebrows rose. "You always interrogate strangers in snowstorms." "Only the ones I am considering not leaving outside." That surprised him. He handed me his driver's license. The photograph matched. Nathan Calloway, 37, Chicago address. I took a picture and sent it to my best friend with one message telling her to call me in the morning. Nathan watched without complaint. "Smart," he said. "Do not sound impressed yet." I returned his license. "I have a couch. It is terrible, but it is indoors." His expression changed. "Rachel, you do not know me." Hearing my name startled me until I remembered the bookstore badge still pinned to my coat. "I know, which is why there are rules." I unlocked the building entrance. "One night. The couch. You do not wander around. At sunrise, you leave." Nathan remained outside for another second. "Fair." My studio was 410 square feet of books, secondhand furniture, and financial compromise. Nathan stepped inside and immediately seemed too large for it. I locked the door behind us. "Coat there. Couch there. Bathroom on the left." You make hospitality sound threatening. It keeps expectations realistic. I found an old gray sweatshirt that had belonged to my father and placed it beside a clean towel. "You can change out of the wet coat." "Coffee, please." While the machine sputtered, I caught Nathan looking through the narrow window beside the radiator. His expression had changed. Not frightened. Focused. I followed his gaze. A black SUV moved slowly through the snow below, its headlights sweeping across the brick buildings before disappearing around the corner. "Something wrong?" I asked. Nathan waited several seconds before answering. "Probably not." 10 minutes later, while I was carrying my coffee toward the bedroom, the same black SUV passed our building again. This time Nathan was already watching it. The third time the black SUV passed my building, Nathan stopped pretending it meant nothing. I stood beside the kitchen counter with my coffee cooling between my hands while he remained near the window, careful not to move directly in front of the glass. The old gray sweatshirt fit him across the shoulders, but ended a little too high at his wrists. Combined with tailored trousers, an expensive watch, and polished shoes drying beside my unreliable radiator, he looked like 2 completely different men forced into the same room. "Do you know that vehicle?" I asked. "No." That answer took too long. Nathan glanced at me. "I have seen vehicles like it." That somehow made your answer worse. He stepped away from the window. "You are right." I stared at him. Most men I knew defended themselves before admitting anything. Nathan seemed to calculate the truth before speaking, which was not exactly reassuring. I pointed toward the couch. "Sit." One eyebrow lifted. Was that an order? "My apartment. My rules." To my surprise, he sat. The couch gave an embarrassing squeak beneath him. "Do not insult the furniture," I said. I said nothing. "Your face did." That faint smile returned. I handed him a chipped green mug of coffee. He wrapped both hands around it, absorbing the warmth. "Why did you let me in?" he asked. "We already covered this." "No. You gave me rules. You never gave me a reason." I leaned against the counter. Because you were freezing. That is all. That should be enough. Something changed in his expression. It was subtle, almost invisible, but for the first time since he entered my apartment, Nathan looked genuinely caught off guard. People do not usually do things for no reason, he said. There was a reason. You were cold. And what do you expect in return? For you to leave at sunrise. He looked down at the coffee. Nothing else. You have a very strange relationship with kindness. Maybe. Snow tapped softly against the window. The radiator knocked twice, then fell silent again. I studied him more carefully. What do you do for work? Nathan took a slow drink. I manage several businesses. What kind? Transportation, property, hospitality. That sounds suspiciously broad. It is a broad job. And does your broad job normally involve strangers driving past your windows after midnight? His eyes returned to the curtain. No. That answer came quickly. So tonight is unusual. Very. I folded my arms. Nathan, if I am in danger because I let you inside, I need to know. His expression became serious. I do not believe you are. Believe. If I thought staying here put you at immediate risk, I would leave. Into 20-degree weather? Yes. There was no drama in his voice. That bothered me more than drama would have. Who were you supposed to meet tonight? I asked. Nathan was silent. Then he said, someone I trusted. Past tense. His jaw tightened slightly. I am reconsidering the tense. Before I could ask another question, headlights swept across my ceiling. Nathan stood. The SUV had returned. This time it slowed directly beneath my window. Then it stopped. The SUV remained beneath my window for almost a minute, long enough for silence to become its own kind of pressure. Nathan stood beside the couch, his attention fixed on the thin curtain. I reached toward it. Do not. His voice was quiet, but the command stopped my hand. I turned. Excuse me. Nathan immediately stepped back. You are right. I should have asked. Please stay away from the window until we know why they stopped. Better. I lowered my hand. But you are still avoiding the important question. Which one? Who are you? The radiator clicked behind us. Nathan looked at the clock on my microwave. 4:12 in the morning. Someone changed where I was supposed to be tonight, he said. You told me that. My driver received instructions to take a different route. The message appeared to come from someone authorized to send it. But it did not. I do not believe so. And your phone stopped connecting shortly afterward. I stared at him. You have an expensive watch, expensive shoes, and apparently a driver, but no backup phone. The backup was in the vehicle. I left the car when I realized the route change might not be accidental. That explanation made uncomfortable sense. Why leave? Because staying inside a compromised plan seemed worse. Compromised plan? I repeated. Normal people say bad situation. I have been accused of being overly specific. By your employees? A brief pause. Among others. I looked toward the window. The SUV had not moved. So somebody you trusted sent you somewhere you were not supposed to go. Yes. And you ended up outside my building. Yes. Was that part of their plan? Nathan's eyes hardened with concentration. That is what I need to find out. My stomach tightened. You think my building matters? I think coincidences become less convincing when someone has already manipulated the route. I picked up my phone. Then I am calling the police. If that makes you feel safer, you should. I studied him, expecting resistance. There was none. You really mean that? This is your home, Rachel. Your safety. Outranks my preference for privacy. Before I could answer, the SUV began moving again. It rolled through the intersection and vanished behind the curtain of snow. Nathan exhaled slowly. Do you recognize it now? No. Then why do you look relieved? Because whoever was inside chose not to come upstairs. I hated how calmly he said it. I poured fresh coffee, even though my hands had started trembling. Nathan noticed, but said nothing. What happens now? I asked. At sunrise, I leave. That was our agreement. I met with the person who changed your route. Nathan took the chipped green mug when I offered it. I find out why. And then, I decide what deserves my trust after I know the truth. That was the closest he had come to sounding tired instead of mysterious. I sat on the arm of the couch. You know what bothers me? Several things, apparently. You are standing in a 410-square-foot apartment wearing my father's sweatshirt, drinking terrible coffee, and somehow you still sound like the person in charge. His mouth curved slightly. The coffee is not terrible. Now I know you are lying. For 1 second, he laughed. Then headlights appeared again through the curtain. Not one vehicle this time. 3. They stopped along the curb below. Nathan's expression changed completely. Do you know those? I whispered. He watched the shadows moving across the snow. Yes. Friends. Nathan did not answer immediately. Then the building buzzer sounded, sharp and sudden in the pre-dawn quiet. He looked at me. We are about to find out. The buzzer sounded again before either of us moved. Nathan watched me, but he did not reach for the intercom. That detail mattered. Whatever authority he carried outside my apartment, he seemed to understand that the button on my wall belonged to me. I pressed it. Who is it? A man's voice answered through the speaker. Michael Grant. I am looking for Nathan Calloway. I glanced at Nathan. His shoulders relaxed by half an inch. You know him? Yes. Trust him. Nathan considered the question. More than most people this morning. I pressed the button again. Why are you looking for him? Silence lasted 2 seconds. We lost contact with Mr. Calloway shortly after midnight. We have been searching since then. Who is we? Another pause. His staff. I looked at Nathan. Staff. Technically accurate. That answer is doing a lot of work. The first gray light of morning had begun leaking around the curtains. My microwave clock read 6:08. Sunrise. Almost exactly when our agreement ended. Tell him to come upstairs alone, Nathan said. I raised an eyebrow. Ask him to come upstairs alone. Nathan corrected himself immediately. Please. I buzzed Michael inside. A few minutes later, 3 measured knocks sounded at my door. Nathan stayed several feet behind me while I checked the peephole. A man in a dark wool coat stood alone in the hallway. I opened the door with the chain still secured. Michael. Yes, ma'am. His eyes moved past me and found Nathan. The relief on his face was immediate. Mr. Calloway. Nathan stepped closer but remained behind the threshold. Where's the car? Recovered near Wacker Drive. The route instructions were falsified. Source. Still tracing it. Michael hesitated, then lowered his voice. Boss. Victor Hale authorized a meeting without you while we were trying to locate you. Boss. One word. That was all it took. I turned slowly toward Nathan. He closed his eyes for a second, as if he had hoped the truth might wait another 5 minutes. Boss. I repeated. Michael looked from him to me and seemed to realize he had stepped into a conversation nobody had prepared him for. Nathan spoke calmly. Rachel, let me explain. I think Michael just explained plenty. Not enough. Then start with why a man who manages transportation, property, and hospitality has employees calling him boss at 6 in the morning. Nathan held my gaze. Because those businesses are only the public part of what I manage. The hallway suddenly felt colder. What is the private part? He did not soften the answer. My family has controlled an organized network in Chicago for decades. I took responsibility for it after my father died. I stared at him. You are telling me you are a mafia boss? Yes. Behind him sat my second-hand couch. On the counter was my chipped green mug. He was still wearing my father's faded gray sweatshirt. Nothing in the room had changed, yet everything looked different. You let me invite you inside without telling me. I gave you my real name. You gave me the smallest possible piece of the truth. Yes. That is still deception. Nathan nodded. You are right. No excuse. No intimidation. Somehow that made my anger cleaner. I looked at the microwave clock again. 6:11. Sunrise. Nathan followed my eyes. I remember. Then our deal is over. He walked to the chair, picked up his coat, and put it on over the gray sweatshirt. Michael stepped aside from the doorway. Nathan paused before leaving. I am sorry I brought this to your door. Find out why you did. His expression sharpened. What do you mean? I looked toward the snowy street below, where 3 black SUVs waited beneath the waking city. You said someone changed your route. You ended up outside my building. If Victor Hale arranged both things, I want to know whether my address was an accident. Nathan became completely still. For the first time since Michael called him boss, the power in his face disappeared beneath something colder and more uncertain. So do I. By 6:15, Nathan Calloway was standing in my hallway wearing a coat worth more than 3 months of my rent over my father's faded gray sweatshirt. And somehow the strangest thing was that he actually left when I told him to. No argument. No offer of money. No promise that I would regret sending him away. He simply looked at me once, nodded, and stepped into the hall beside Michael Grant. I noticed the sweatshirt as I started closing the door. Wait. Nathan turned. That belongs to you. He reached for the hem. Keep it. His hand stopped. Rachel. You still look cold. Something passed across his face that I could not name. Thank you. Do not make it sentimental. I would not dare. I closed the door, locked it, and stood there listening until the elevator carried both men away. 10 minutes later, I watched from behind the curtain as Nathan crossed the snowy sidewalk toward the waiting vehicles. The difference was almost absurd. The man who had spent the night drinking bad coffee on my second-hand couch walked toward 3 black SUVs, and every person waiting outside seemed to straighten when he appeared. Nobody needed to tell me who held authority. I could see it now. Then Nathan stopped beside the first vehicle and looked up at my window. I stepped away before he could see me. I did not sleep. By 8:30, I was showered, dressed, and on the train to the bookstore, surviving on caffeine and stubbornness. My best friend, Emily, called before I reached work. You sent me a stranger's driver's license at 1 in the morning and then disappeared. I was sleeping. Were you? Not exactly. I told her enough to make her silent for nearly 5 seconds, which might have been a personal record. Rachel, you let a mafia boss sleep on your couch? He was not a mafia boss when I opened the door. I am fairly certain that is not how employment works. Despite everything, I laughed. The sound felt normal. I needed normal. For the next 3 days, I heard nothing from Nathan. No mysterious cars. No expensive flowers. No men in dark coats waiting outside the bookstore. I began convincing myself that one impossible night had ended exactly where it should have. Then, on Thursday afternoon, my landlord taped a notice beside the building mailboxes. I almost ignored it. Our building produced notices the way my radiator produced unexplained noises. But one phrase caught my attention. Proposed ownership review. I read the page twice. An investment company had approached the owners about purchasing the property. Nothing had been finalized, but tenants were being informed because management expected inspections and document requests. I photographed the notice and went upstairs. At 6:20, someone knocked on my door. 3 measured knocks. I froze. I checked the peephole. Nathan stood alone in the hallway. No Michael. No entourage. He wore a charcoal coat and held a thin folder in one hand. The gray sweatshirt was visible beneath the open collar. I left the chain secured when I opened the door. You kept it. Nathan glanced down. You told me to. That is unexpectedly obedient. Do not spread it around. I almost smiled. Almost. Then I saw his expression. Why are you here? Nathan lifted the folder, but did not try to hand it through the doorway. I found out who changed my route. My fingers tightened around the door. Victor Hale. Yes. In my building? Nathan looked past me toward the hallway notice downstairs, then back at me. That is why I came. The humor disappeared from my face. Nathan. His voice lowered. Victor has been trying to acquire this property for 6 months. I stared at him. 6 months. Rachel, I no longer believe I ended up outside your building by accident. I kept the chain on the door for another 5 seconds, mostly because I needed something ordinary to hold on to. Start talking. Nathan looked at the narrow opening between us. Would you rather I explain from the hallway? For now. He accepted that without complaint. Victor used an investment company called Lakeview Urban Holdings to approach your building's owners. On paper, it looks independent. It is not. It belongs to him. Not directly. That is the problem. Nathan lifted the folder slightly. Several companies sit between Victor and the purchase offer. My accountants traced enough connections to concern me, but not enough to explain why this building matters. And your route. The false instructions sent my driver within 2 blocks of this address. A cold feeling settled in my stomach. You think Victor wanted you here. I think he wanted me somewhere specific. I do not know whether this building was the destination or merely part of the route. That is not comforting. It was not intended to be. I looked at the gray sweatshirt beneath his coat and remembered him standing beside my radiator 3 nights earlier, shivering while pretending he was fine. Now I understood how little I had known. Why tell me? I asked. Because your home is involved. That did not answer my question. Nathan's gaze stayed on mine. Because you deserve the truth before I decide what to do with it. That answer was better. I closed the door, removed the chain, then opened it again. You can come in for 20 minutes. Understood. And no orders. Understood. He stepped across the threshold only after I moved aside. The apartment looked exactly as it had that night. Books. Couch. Chipped green mug beside the sink. Nathan noticed the mug and almost smiled, but I pointed toward the table. Folder. He placed it down and opened it. There were property records, company names, and dates. I recognized almost nothing until one address caught my attention. Wait. I leaned closer. That company. Nathan looked at the page. Bennett Property Services? My chest tightened. My father worked there. Nathan became still. Thomas Bennett? I stared at him. How do you know his name? It appears in an old filing connected to this property. He turned several pages and stopped. There it was. Thomas Bennett. My father's name printed beneath a company address I remembered from childhood. He was an accountant, I said quietly. He hated talking about work. He said property companies were mostly paperwork and headaches. Nathan studied the document. How long ago did he work there? More than 15 years. He died 5 years ago. Nathan did not offer one of those automatic condolences people use to fill silence. He simply waited. Then a memory surfaced. There is a box. What box? My father helped the old building manager with tax records sometimes. After he died, Mr. Ellis gave me a storage box from the basement. I never opened most of it. Nathan's attention sharpened. Where is it? Downstairs. He stood automatically. I did not. Nathan looked at me, then slowly sat again. Right. No orders. You are learning. Painfully. I took my keys from the counter. We go together. The basement smelled like dust, concrete, and old heating pipes. I found the storage shelf behind 2 broken chairs. The cardboard box was still there. My father's handwriting faded across the lid. Nathan stood several feet away while I carried it to an old work table. You are not touching anything until I say so. Agreed. I opened the lid. Tax folders. Maintenance receipts. Yellow envelopes. Then I found one sealed envelope with my father's handwriting across the front. My name. Rachel. I stopped breathing for a second. Nathan saw it too. That was meant for you, he said. I turned the envelope over. Beneath my name, my father had written 5 more words. Keep this with the building records. I looked at Nathan. He did not move closer. Open it, he said softly, then caught himself. If you want to. My father's handwriting had always leaned slightly to the right, as if every sentence was in a hurry to reach the truth before he changed his mind. I stood beneath the basement light with the envelope between my fingers and remembered grocery lists on the refrigerator, birthday cards signed with the same uneven letters, notes tucked into my lunch when I was a kid. For 5 years, I had believed there would never be another message from him. Nathan waited across the work table. He did not ask again. I opened the envelope. Inside were 3 folded pages and several photocopied records. The letter was short. My father explained that while working for Bennett Property Services, he had discovered transactions involving companies that appeared unrelated but repeatedly moved money through the same properties. Our building was one of them. He had copied records because numbers were being changed after reports were submitted. He never accused anyone by name. He simply wrote that if ownership of the building was ever challenged, the documents might matter. My hands tightened around the paper. He knew. Nathan's voice was quiet. He suspected. For years, this was sitting downstairs while I complained about the radiator. You had no reason to know. I unfolded the photocopies. Company names. Dates. Property transfers. Nathan moved closer, then stopped before reaching the table. May I? I looked at him. That one question mattered more than it should have. Yes. He stood beside me and studied the records without touching them. After a minute, his expression changed. What? I asked. I recognized 2 of these companies. Victor. Companies connected to people who have worked with him. That is not the same thing. Nathan glanced at me, and something almost approving appeared in his eyes. No, it is not. Which means these need to be authenticated before anyone makes conclusions. I looked back at the letter. So what happens? You decide what happens to your father's documents. And what do you want? He answered immediately. Copies. Why? Because if Victor has been using layered companies to influence property purchases, I need to understand the extent of it. Need or want? Nathan considered that. Both. I gathered the papers into a neat stack. Then we make copies together. Originals stay with me. Agreed. And an attorney looks at them before you use anything. Agreed. I narrowed my eyes. You are becoming suspiciously cooperative. I spent one night on your couch. Apparently, it was educational. I almost smiled. Upstairs, I used the small scanner beside my desk while Nathan waited. Page by page, the machine hummed. Ordinary sound. Extraordinary morning. When the last copy finished, I handed him the duplicate set. This does not make us partners. I know. It does not mean I trust your organization. I know that too. And if you discover something that affects this building, you tell me before somebody makes a decision over my head. Nathan held the folder at his side. Yes. That sounded dangerously close to a promise. It was one. I walked him to the door. Before leaving, he glanced at the faded gray sweatshirt under his coat. You asked why I came back instead of sending someone. I assumed you did not trust anyone else. Partly. His gaze settled on me. But mostly because you were the first person that night who had nothing to gain from helping me. I opened the door. Do not turn basic decency into mythology. I am trying not to. He stepped into the hallway, then stopped. His phone rang. He looked at the screen, and the warmth disappeared from his expression. Michael? I asked. Nathan answered, listened for several seconds, then looked back at me. Victor knows we found the records. My stomach dropped. How? Nathan ended the call. That is the question. He looked down the empty hallway, then at the folder in his hand. Because only 4 people knew I was coming here today. Only 4 people knew Nathan was coming to my apartment, and by noon, one of them had stopped answering his phone. Nathan did not tell me that dramatically. He stood in my hallway, checked one message from Michael, and said, my property advisor is unavailable. Unavailable sounds like a word people use when they do not want to say missing. He missed 2 scheduled calls. That is all we know. Then do not turn suspicion into evidence. Nathan looked at me for a moment. Your father would probably have liked you. The comment caught me off guard. You knew him for 3 photocopied pages. I know he trusted numbers more than assumptions. I looked down at the original document still in my hands. Then we do the same. That afternoon, I contacted an attorney recommended by the bookstore owner, not by Nathan. He respected that. Over the next 2 weeks, the story became less mysterious and more complicated. My father's records were compared with county filings, archived corporate documents, and accounting records Nathan's legitimate businesses could legally access. Slowly, patterns emerged. Victor Hale had connections to several companies involved in property purchases across our neighborhood. My building was not random. Neither was Nathan's altered route. Victor had expected Nathan to approve a major agreement that night while distracted elsewhere, and sending him toward our block created confusion around a property Victor already wanted. What Victor had not planned was me opening my door. That single decision had connected Nathan to records Victor apparently believed were forgotten. Then Victor made his offer. Nathan told me about it at the bookstore after closing. Snowmelt streaked the windows while I counted the register. He will withdraw the purchase attempt, Nathan said. And he will transfer his interest in another business agreement to me. I stopped counting. In exchange for what? I stopped examining the old transactions. I stared at him. And my father's records? Remain yours. That sounds almost reasonable if you ignore everything underneath it. Yes. Are you considering it? Nathan looked toward the shelves. 2 weeks ago I would have. I waited. And now? He placed the faded gray sweatshirt he had been carrying over the back of a chair. Now I keep hearing you tell me that kindness should not require payment. This is not kindness. This is accountability. I am beginning to understand the difference. He explained his decision without theatrics. Victor would lose decision-making authority within the businesses Nathan controlled. The questionable property transactions would be reviewed by attorneys and accountants, and anything requiring outside disclosure would be handled through the appropriate legal channels. Nathan would not take my originals. He would not use my father's records as private leverage. I studied him. You are giving up a profitable agreement. Yes. Why? Because leverage is useful only until it becomes the reason you stop recognizing what is right. I leaned against the counter. That almost sounded healthy. Do not spread that around either. I smiled despite myself. Then I looked at the sweatshirt. You still wear that? Nathan glanced at it. Sometimes. It is older than half the books in this store. It reminds me of something. Bad coffee. That too. His expression softened. It reminds me that you gave me something when you thought I had nothing. I shook my head. Nathan, I gave you a sweatshirt because you were freezing. Exactly. For once, neither of us had anything clever to say. Outside, Chicago traffic moved through wet streets, ordinary and loud. Nathan picked up his coat. At the door, he stopped without crossing back toward me. Rachel, when this is finished, I want to see you again. You are seeing me now. Not because of Victor. Not because of documents. Not because either of us needs something. I understood what he was asking. Finish this first. Nathan nodded. Fair. Then he left, and for the first time since the night I found him in the snow, I realized I was not waiting to discover what kind of man Nathan Calloway had been. I was waiting to see what kind of man he would choose to become. A year later, at 12:47 in the morning, someone knocked 3 times on my apartment door while snow covered Chicago all over again. I was sitting on the same second-hand couch with a book open in my lap and the radiator making its familiar argument with winter. For one strange second, I felt as if the year between that night and this one had folded in half. Then came 3 more knocks. Measured. Patient. I already knew. I checked the peephole anyway. Nathan stood alone in the hallway. No Michael. No black SUVs waiting outside. No emergency hidden behind his expression. Just Nathan in a charcoal coat with snow melting across his shoulders. I opened the door, but remained in the threshold. Car trouble. No. Dead phone. He removed it from his pocket and showed me the illuminated screen. Fully charged. Suspiciously prepared. I have learned from previous mistakes. I looked behind him. No driver. He dropped me off 2 blocks away. Why? I wanted to walk. I folded my arms. In 20-degree weather? Nathan smiled. Apparently, I have complicated feelings about freezing. I noticed gray fabric beneath his coat. You are still wearing that sweatshirt. It survived. Against all reasonable expectations. For months after Victor's offer, attorneys and accountants had worked through the records my father left behind. The attempted purchase of our building had been withdrawn. Several transactions were referred for formal review. Victor lost his authority within Nathan's businesses, and whatever happened after that belonged to lawyers, filings, and consequences I did not need to control. Nathan kept his promise. He never asked for my originals. Never decided for me. Never appeared without calling first. Until tonight. You did not call, I said. I know. That violates your excellent recent record. I was hoping you might forgive one surprise. I studied him. Why are you here? His smile disappeared, leaving something quieter. Because the first time I came to this door, I needed somewhere to go. Snow whispered against the hallway window behind him. And this time I wanted to come before I needed anything. I did not answer immediately. Nathan stayed where he was. That mattered too. A year earlier, I had thought power meant being able to enter any room. Nathan had taught me something different by learning it himself. Sometimes power was standing outside a door you could probably open and choosing to wait. Coffee? I asked. Is it still? Terrible. Absolutely. Then yes. I stepped aside. Nathan looked at the threshold, then at me. That was an invitation? Do not make me reconsider it. He entered. The apartment was still 410 square feet. The couch still squeaked. The radiator still worked only when emotionally prepared. My chipped green mug still lived beside the coffee maker. Nathan took off his coat and sat exactly where he had sat the first night. You changed nothing, he said. I changed the curtains. He looked toward the window. I stand corrected. I handed him the green mug. He wrapped both hands around it. And suddenly I saw the stranger from the snow again. Not the Mafia Boss. Not the man whose name opened doors across the city. Just the man who had once been cold enough to accept kindness from someone who had nothing he wanted. Why did you really let me in that night? He asked. I sat across from him. You are still asking that. I am still trying to understand it. Because you were freezing. Nathan smiled into the steam. That should be enough? It should always have been enough. Outside, snow erased our footprints almost as quickly as we made them. The first night, I opened my door because Nathan was cold. A year later, I opened it because he had finally learned that being invited inside meant more than having the power to enter.